Hi. So we're going to be doing an inductive study technique in Colossians 1, starting in verse 1. Inductive study really uses three main themes. The first is, so you're going to do this verse by verse. The first is observation. And your observation is really going to be done by asking a series of questions. You have macro questions and micro questions. Your macro questions are going to be things like what kind of writing is it? Who's the author or the audience? And your micro questions are typically going to be observations from within the verse. What does a word mean? Why did the author use this phrase? What was his purpose, etc. After that, we'll interpret the verse, and then the final step is a specific application. So, starting in verse 1, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God, and Timotheus, our brother. So, Paul and Timothy are the authors here. Um, Paul was an apostle, and you can read more about him and how he became an apostle. Probably start in chapter 8 for some of Acts for some background, and then for him actually becoming an apostle, you would want to look at Acts chapter 9. It was written around 60 to 63 AD. The type of writing is a letter. And if for their macro questions, we probably want to look at the first word would be apostle. And apostle is from the Greek word apostolos. And probably the best way to translate is ambassador. So an ambassador is someone who was specifically chosen to represent a given person, just like the president. He gets a list of people that are recommended, and then he goes to that list and he approves them to represent him. So it's very similar for Christ. He came down and chose specific people to represent him as apostles. The next word that we'll look at is will. So what is will? So will comes from the Greek word thelema. So you have a root word here of thele, which means will or desire, and then you have a suffix of ma, and that ma is generally thought that the ma means the result of. So you see that suffix on a variety of different words. When it uses will for God, it's going to use the word thelema most, if not all of the time, indicating that God's will always has results. And typically what you see used for the will of man is just the word thelo, which is the root word. So how does Paul know he's an apostle by the will of God? And the answer to that question is to go back to Acts chapter 9, where Jesus actually came down to him on the road to Damascus and blinded him, and then effectively made him an apostle and gave him a purpose, gave him a mission. What is brother? It says Timothy, our brother. So brother is the word adelphos, and that should sound familiar. It's where we get the word Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And adelphos is, it could be a family brother, like you have the same parents, or it could just mean that you're maybe you're part of the same organization, or that you're great friends. So it's a pretty common word. In this particular instance, and the way it's used in the New Testament, is of a brother in Christ.